Hold on.
I think we're live.
Yeah. So yeah, tell me about the Sunset series.
Well, basically, I've been trying to show the concept of connecting the human body to the greatest flows of our creation, which are more related to the rising and setting of the sun, the cycles of the moon, the planetary cycles. And it just so happened that the very first video was on March 21st, which was the equinox. So it's the equal amount of daylight, 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night, you know? So that's a really good moment to do that. And we just passed the summer solstice, which is June 21st. And we're approaching July 21st, which would be 4 months into it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So about tonight will be day 115.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I watched every single one of them up until about 3 weeks ago for a very specific reason. Because, and I think this is where a lot of people struggle with, it was all in my head and I wanted to make it real. This is the constant ebb and flow of everything. I love the end of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. The main character at the very end of the book, he has this realization of like, oh, this is when life becomes theory, or theory becomes life. When life takes the place of theory. And that's what I've been trying to do for the past 2+ years. But listening to those conversations, I'm like, if this is real, how do I apply this to my life? So I'm curious from your perspective, what is that the first step that people should take is getting in sync with their circadian rhythm? Like step number one.
I think it's a really simple step, is to just kind of try to control your body a little bit more. And what I mean by that is controlling your day-to-day life. And a really easy thing to do is to connect to the rising and setting of the sun. When it comes to the evolution of the human body, well, we evolved theoretically, right? Just going with science and stuff. We evolved on Earth, which is a vortex that's orbiting the vortex that is the sun. And being in line with that flow allows your body to have its greatest potential energy ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to aligning the chakra system and things of that nature, I do think that aligning your circadian rhythm, because that's the natural process. That's like the natural in and out motion of the brain harmony, delta through fast gamma waves. And so by going with the natural flows of your creation, that will help align your body. And so that's what I've been showing over those last couple months is what I would call a spiritual alchemy. So reducing the pacing motions of your life in order to reach the greatest creation that you can be, right? Because every time you have a doubt or something of that nature, you're always kind of missing the mark. I think that's even like the word they use in the Bible is like when you sin, you miss your mark. So every time you have a doubt or you're holding on to these different postures, somewhat related to your ego, you might not be in that laminar flow. You might be missing your mark a little bit. So a lot of it had to do with that whole spiritual alchemy thing, returning to like your greatest self. And
so yeah. Funny little synchronicity. I wrote alchemy there. Because that was so that's one of the key questions I want to ask you, because in my own journey of doing research and doing my own self-reflection, and it's this common theme of, if we're going from a base state to a higher level state, which is alchemy, right? A base metal to a higher level metal, isn't the ripples in your theories, isn't the ripples or the rust when you talk to Lou Elizondo, isn't that necessary? It's not a thing to be avoided. It's actually a part of this greater process of transforming ourselves from a lower state to a higher state.
Yeah, I mean, I think an easy way to think of it is as like a pendulum. So like imagine you're holding a pendulum, so it's swinging back and forth. I mean, naturally the pendulum will just slowly stop swinging about that perfect center and then eventually find it. So like when you're off center, that's part of the flow. And that's why I like to call that like the walls of your spiritual potential. So like as you swing and you push so far in one direction, well, ultimately love and all experiences are going to bring you back to that laminar flow, but then you might pass it again. You might pass it again. You might pass it again. So I do think that is part of the natural process. Yeah.
And this is something I am just dipping my toes into, reincarnation. So how does that carry over into your next reincarnation or your next incarnation?
Man, we're jumping straight into it. So that's I would call that
Yes.
being in tune with the laminar flow. And I think the easiest way to start to relate to that is to think about lucid dreaming. So when you are, say this is like you're perfectly centered, now you've allowed denser vibrations of your own creation to basically exist. In order for like a standing wave to exist on a guitar, for example, it needs to be a perfect factor of a wave. But if the tension's not right, then the waves won't basically add up properly. It's the easiest way to put it. So when you want to create multiple waves, it needs to be so not just one wave. So now you have this perfect circle. 2 waves can now fit inside that perfect circle. You can break that into 4 waves. And so how does that relate to lucid dreaming? Well, we're only really, your average human is only typically aware when they're in their alpha and beta states of brain harmony, maybe slow gamma, they're aware of the physical realm. And so you would already be in those little circles. But if your awareness is perfectly centered through that flow, you can harmonize to all the different wave sizes because you're interacting with every single one of them in a conscious sense. And so now, okay, so how does that translate into lucid dreaming? Well, you need to somewhat be centered when you go into your dream state, which would be the theta and delta waves of the human experience. So that means that basically you now have your awareness through those less dense realms, which typically translates into an even lesser dense realm, which is the one that's even further outward. But that same centeredness translates into being in line with the denser realms as well. So when you hit that perfect center, it somewhat creates what I call a golden chain, which is a transference of information, of awareness through the different dimensional layers, because you're at the center point, you're at that center node of all the different rings. So your awareness can inhabit them. And so when it comes to a past life, well, that would be existing in an outer realm, less dense. When it comes to a future life, that would be in a denser realm. And so ultimately, by finding your center, it naturally links you to your lucid dreams. It naturally links you to your pre-life in a way and your post-life. I'm not going to say I have that fully mastered, but that's the theory behind it there, you know?
So much of what you talk about sounds like, and I know you don't do a lot of research into other theories because your whole theory is your interpersonal relationship with the greater truth. It's everything you say sounds like it's taking pieces from everything, right? Christianity, Eastern religions, right? Which culminates into what, have you heard of Rosicrucianism?
I mean, I've heard of that, but I've never studied it. It's a lot like Freemasonry as well. I believe they're related.
A little bit.
Okay.
But so everything that you're saying, how we come, and we're going right into it, Alexei, because this is what's on my mind. And I really want to dive into it. So we are the result of less dense realms.
Yes. That's the way I see it. Totally. Do you want to go more into that, or do you want?
Yes. And I know you like to say God's God, 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 but is there a lot of religions believe there's a universal consciousness, which precedes everything. Does that fit into any of your theories, or is it just a fractal, an infinite fractal?
It is an infinite fractal, in my opinion, but then at the same time, that is all the multiverses overlapping to create one physical structure. And so as the outer realms distort and change, that creates distortions within our realm. We create distortions within inner realms, but they're always changing. It's like fluid flowing through a river. As the raw energy that's powering our entire dimension is like drifting inwards, that's like the river of your creation coming inwards. And so it's always bubbling, but it's always changing based off of, you could say, the postures that someone holds, like in mind or in their body or in their spirit. So less dense realms potentially could have some type of anxiety or panic attack. Well, that's going to create a pacing motion that within everyone within it, which would create a pacing motion within our denser creations as well. And so not only, yeah, so basically you get what I'm saying there, right? So I mean, God is ultimately everything, in my opinion. It would be all the different dimensional layers, but then the question is always what started that. So I think from a physics point of view, it makes sense to just say there's a vortex of infinity, and you can have dimensional relationships within it. in order to actually make technologies to use it in a practical engineering way.
Yes. So are we in the middle of the alchemical process that the dimensions above us were once at, and then they hit their perfect center and then created us, and now we're undergoing that same alchemical process?
That's the $1 million question right there. I mean, I don't know if I could really tell you that. I don't know if from what I understand, that once you hit that center, you can jump up to a less dense awareness. But while you're up in that less dense awareness, you can also have an anxiety attack. And now all of a sudden you've dropped down a dimensional layer. So I don't think that it's necessarily that all beings are constantly rising. I think that it's individuals rise, but then they can fall. And that again relates to the pacing motion we were talking about earlier, but to a bigger degree, when we're speaking on reincarnation cycles.
Right.
Yeah. So like your next life, maybe you are in a less dense realm or something of that nature, but the one after that, you might be in a denser realm, depending on the way I see it is that light state harmony. So like how your harmony is with the incoming universe at the moment of a conscious shift is really what determines the starting point and how that next experience will go. So say you pass away and you're perfectly at one, well, then you probably are going to ascend. If now you're an ascended being, but like you're not perfectly centered, you're probably going to descend. So I do think it's a constant climbing, maybe 2 steps up, 1 step down kind of thing. Yeah. But I don't know 100%, you know, that's just where I would go with it as far as like,
Right.
yeah. Deep questions, you know?
Yes.
Because I don't think we could ever be above God. You know what I'm saying? Like ultimately, like you have the greatest creator, and I don't think we could ever surpass that, you know?
And I don't know if is there a driving force of meaning behind this? I don't know if we're supposed to, or I don't even know if that's the right way to phrase this question. Is there a meaning? I know this is the $1 million question too, but can we surmise a meaning from all of this? I think what a lot of religions, when you find the connecting thing between all of them, the meaning is a raising of consciousness, right? But then a lot of the Eastern religions, they take it to one degree where it's like, get off the karmic cycle. They take it to an extreme, right? And then us in the Western world, we almost take it to the other opposite extreme for the large portion of the population, which is like strict materialism, right?
Yeah.
And I think what you say is walking that middle road, right?
Well, that because then you can connect to all the different densities when you do that. When you're stuck in like the materialistic point of view, basically that is almost like being compared to someone who's like a golden chain, it's like being a drug addict where all you have is like a 30-second spiral of awareness. And so in a way, and you could consider them like almost like our parents that are in those less dense realms. And so would you want to see your children just stuck staring at an iPhone all day, the materialistic realm, or would you want to see them get out and enjoy life, right? Like actually fulfill a bigger purpose in a way. So I think that's where it more relates to that kind of thought process. Like right now we're limited to our dimension, our materialistic realm, but through meditation, through alignment of spirit and things of that nature, you can have an awareness of less dense and more dense realms.
But are we limited, or is this exactly where we need to be? Because there's an alchemical process happening of let's be forced on this physical plane and undergo this alchemical process. Like I think we discussed this on our last interview of, the option is, do we just go out into the woods and meditate all day? But then you're actually removing yourself potentially, in my opinion, from this sacred alchemical process, which is mixing the physical plane with finding your center.
Well, and that has a lot to do with the development of spirit. And you can only really truly develop your spirit or like what you know to be right and like your direction of bliss through those materialistic actions, right? Like, by offending those types of people, hey, well, that's not going to increase harmony. Or by doing these actions, that's not going to make more harmony. So yeah, I could just go live in the woods, but would I learn as much as opposed to living? That's why people always say in my videos, hey, why are you doing this in such a noisy dock in a noisy place? And it's like, so I can rub off and so they can rub off almost, so that the two energies can merge, right? Like, because if I'm out in the woods, then no one will ever hear of this. So it's a way to still be ingrained in the whole cycle of like chaos in a way, meanwhile still finding that perfect center, because it's not just spirit, it's all three aspects. It's mind, body, and spirit. And so if you're not aligning, if your body's not learning, I don't know, I think it all needs to go as one. So yeah, I would say that. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, I love that. So let me ask you, what in the past year have any of your beliefs changed or theories been upgraded or any new information be, given to you through various meditation practices? Has any changes in the past year that are noteworthy?
I don't think that I had written the book Mind, Body, Spirit last time we talked.
I don't think so.
So the one thing that really came from that was the physics behind prayer. And I thought that was really interesting, because when I first saw it, I was like, wait, is it maybe this is what's going on, right? And so it ends up tying into the whole witching hour thing even too, but also like how to prepare yourself for praying, and what times maybe you should be listening versus what times should you be projecting. And that really comes down. So the easiest way to put it was, say you have the raw spirit of creation constantly drifting inwards. You have your delta waves, your theta, your alpha, and your beta waves interacting with this fluid. I could even show a quick picture from the book. It might actually help a lot. But so now what you see is that raw energy of creation is constantly drifting inwards. And so the first brain waves to even interact with it are your delta waves. The second ones are your theta waves. The third ones are your alpha. That's when we experience it in the awake state. And what's super interesting is that those delta and theta waves are what create typically your subconscious mind. So all of our subconscious minds are interacting with this raw fluid of superposition before it's even collapsing into our physical alpha and beta day. And so in a way, you could say that the physical that we experience is a conglomeration of the collective subconscious mind of humanity. But so how does that relate to prayer? Well, because we have something called the circadian rhythm. And like we were talking about earlier, like aligning your circadian rhythm is the first step, because that way you become in line with the natural flow. And so you're more in center to begin with. But when you align your circadian rhythm, you realize that you hit certain brain harmonies at certain times of the day. And it comes down into drifting out and drifting in. So like basically a delta wave is a very big wave. So you could say the big red ring would be your delta wave.
Yep.
Now, as you drift inwards, and so you do that from 11 p.m. to 2:30 a.m., delta wave. Then for a circadian rhythm that's in line with the rising sun and the setting sun. For the theta wave, that's basically two different times. You've got, this one, 2:30 a.m. to 5:30 a.m. But then you also have, so that's while drifting towards denser realms, because when you go from delta to beta, you're drifting into a denser vibration, which is our physical realm. But when you're going from beta back out into delta, now you're entering a less dense realm. So there's very specific times of the days when we hit the different densities of creation. And so while you're drifting back out, it's almost like you're paddling out to sea. So imagine trying to surf against waves of an ocean. It's almost impossible to do. And imagine riding a bicycle into the wind. You want to tuck to it, you want to avoid drag. And so as we're drifting out, meaning from a beta wake state back into our dreamland, you want to unpack and remove ego. That way you can actually paddle far out into the ocean in a way and catch a bigger wave as you ride back inward. So from what I've seen now, you basically have points of most submersion. You enter the theta wave around 10:30 at night, but then you enter the delta wave around 11 at night. And so that shows that 10:45 p.m. is like a point of most submersion within the theta field while drifting outward. While drifting outward, you want to be tucked, meaning you want to be listening. You want to remove all your delusions. After 12:45 a.m., that's a turning point from drifting out to drifting back in. And so that's when you actually hop on your surfboard and you ride the waves of creation. So the theta again would be 2:30 a.m. to about 5:30 a.m., with the midpoint being 3:45 a.m., which is perfectly in line with what they would call the witching hour.
Hmm.
So it's like, as we drift out, listen, unpack, remove all your delusions, return perfectly to center. But then as you drift inwards, you can start to control the collapsing of the subconscious minds to create a harmonious physical experience, right?
Yep.
So you see what I'm saying there?
100%.
Okay.
And this goes back to, I hate to keep comparing it, but you might be a reincarnation of a Rosicrucian. That is word for word what the Rosicrucians called Michaelic meditation, which is like a little bit more of an advanced step for Rosicrucians, but it's a form of meditation where on the inhale of the breath, which is kind of what your flow, on the inhale of the breath, you just let go and you observe. And on the exhale of the breath is when you materialize thoughts, images, you view things and start to materialize things.
Yeah, so that same in-out motion is controlled by is controlled by the spirit of creation itself, and that controls the manifestation of a hydrogen atom to the human heartbeat, because it also has that in-out motion, to the human breath, which is that in-out motion, to the circadian rhythm, to the precessional cycle. Like that one vortex controls all of those different in-out motions. And so that makes perfect sense to me, what you just said, like with the in-out. Yeah.
Question. I want to touch on two things in regards to this. I'm asleep at 9:30. So what do I do about that?
That's perfect.
Okay. Oh, because then I lucid dream. Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much. Yeah. Or you have a better chance, I would say. I mean, I think I'm getting to sleep a little bit too late, at this time. So it's always that pacing about the perfect center. So right now, the person that's created by both you and me is probably the one that's hitting that, right? If you're going to bed a little early, I'm going a little late. But that's I also just want to say not everybody's the same either. So that's a very generic circadian rhythm, right? Everybody has a little bit different one though. So
is the thing that needs to precede all of these practices a foundation of love?
Love is a big deal. Because I think, well, forgiveness maybe, because a lot of times the reasons why we are missing the mark is because we're holding on to a grudge of some sort. And so by cultivating that love in a way, you've also cultivated your level of forgiveness. So it's because it's hard to return to that perfect center as you're drifting outwards if you're holding on to doubts or grudges towards another person. So ultimately that's where it is, love with your existence, in a way, like you want to be in love with who you are and with creation, in order to truly have a blissful experience and be able to lucid dream to begin with. That's one thing a lot of practitioners will say too, is that if you have the ability to lucid dream, now you are getting closer to the ability to transferring information through beyond life, to your next lives and past lives. So love is a big part of it, but I would say that because it's related to forgiveness more so, and the ability to love yourself and be perfectly centered. Because if you're, like I said, if you're holding on to a grudge, now you can't be perfectly centered. Yeah.
I think, and in all transparency to your viewers, because I think a lot of people struggle with this just because I interact with human beings and I'm a human being myself, and who doesn't struggle with this? That's the hardest part of the process. I always want to go super down the road of like, what's step number 17? And I'm always pulled back to, but I have to learn how to love myself to a greater degree. And I have to learn how to love others to a greater degree and forgive people, forgive myself. And I keep wanting to jump over that.
Yeah.
And I keep being pulled back like a spring to that first foundational piece, because without that, I really can't, as you're saying, connect with the past and the future. And nothing matters if I can't get, because the foundation of it is love, right? So if I'm not standing on that rock, everything else is in vain.
Not necessarily, because it is that pacing through experiences. So you might have a certain level of like ability to forgive. Now go through your circle and experience a whole bunch of stuff. Now circle back to the whole love lesson. You probably do a little bit better. Now do your circle again. You'll hit that love lesson again. You'll do a little bit better. So I think it's a pacing. It's always a pacing about a perfect center.
Right.
So, and maybe sometimes you love things when maybe it's not always a good thing to go with the flow. Sometimes it's a good idea to like stand ground and say, that's not true to me. So it's always a pacing about that perfect center for me. But the circling back to different concepts and actions, I mean, that's how I do a lot of creative actions to begin with. Like, say I have 5 different projects going on. I don't just finish the first project and then do the second one. I do a little bit on each project and circle it around. And then each project gets more and more defined to the point where they all finish almost at the same time. And so that's how you get that rising of mind, body, and spirit to all rise at the same time. Instead of just fully developing your mind or fully developing your spirit or fully developing your body, develop all 3 through a circling motion.
I love it. It's like that analogy of when the blind man feels the elephant and he doesn't know it's an elephant, but he has to feel the whole structure of the elephant. And he goes, oh, now it's an elephant. But when he first felt the elephant's back leg, he was like, I have no idea what this structure is, but he had to circle the whole structure to get a higher view of what that bigger structure was.
Right. So after you've circled the elephant one time, you go back and you touch the leg. You're like, well, this thing's actually supporting this bigger thing. Okay, let me go around again. Let me go around. And then eventually you're like, okay, this thing has 4 of these legs. It's got a big trunk or something.
So I think the point of that is we're all where we need to be, right?
Pretty much. That's why I think that it's love is the first lesson, because once you understand that you're exactly where you should be, not only based off of your choices, but based off of just nature, that's when you can start to just exhale a little bit. You don't need to stress about being where you are or what you are. Like, you are what and where you should be right now, and just love it. And that's that whole love thing again.
Yeah.
But that's where we get filled by society and the media and stuff like that to think and act in certain ways. Like, I'm 38, I'm supposed to be married, I'm supposed to have kids, I'm supposed to have, certain things. Well, not in a different society, I would have different things, or different things would have been my goals. You get what I'm saying there, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or you're just meant to feel that arbitrary pressure from society in this incarnation of yours.
Exactly. That's why it's hard for me to get upset with people, because people only ever know what they've been shown. Now, if you have someone doing something very maliciously and like they know what they're doing, then it's like, hey, you should stop doing that. But I don't think most people are aware of like when they hurt someone. I think it's pretty accidental most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just had the thought and I corrected myself. I was going to say, well, then why not, if we're exactly where we need to be, then doesn't everything kind of just work itself out in the end? But the second you have that mindset, you actually you're no longer a participant in these activities. There has to be a conscious awareness of the things you're doing, the experiences you're having. Like, you have to experience it. That's what this is all about. It's not just being, it'll work itself out in the end. It will, but you have to go through it as a conscious experience and feel all of the ups and downs.
That's why I like to talk about the different spirals of creation and the different flows, and if you're in tune with the laminar flow, then you're in tune with all the different spirals. But the second someone projects a delusion onto you, now you're stuck within their little spiral. So it depends on how tight your spiral is. Because some people have very negative spirals. And to fulfill that flow of space-time, now you have to do something negative. So that's why I say ego steering. It's important to use your ego to steer through the different delusions at times, to know when to do it. Because you might be in a flow that's the flow, but at the same time, like, now you have to, for example, if I were to be drafted by the government, they want me to go shoot people or something like that, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that, because I think that's just a dumb thing to do to people. Let's talk it out first, kind of thing. Yeah. So at that point, I'd probably use my ego to be like, no, I'm out of here. I'm not going to go fight your war.
Right.
So that's where I think, in order to actually truly have world peace, that's where people really need to put their foot down and say, hey, no, I'm not going to live within your corrupt view of people need to always be at war. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that's more, yes, you'll learn from it, but I don't think that's the best style of learning. I think that's people trying to manipulate the human population for a very material gain, Do
you think the people trying to manipulate the population for material gain, do you think any of them or any portion of them have any conscious awareness of the deeper levels of reality that some people, interact with or a higher level of awareness and they're just trying to manipulate it, or they have no conscious awareness of it?
That's a tough question. Personally, I think if you were more aware, you in general, like if they were more aware, then they wouldn't want to be doing those kinds of things because they would understand that it's like a trap and they're getting sucked into like a Twitter feed or something like that, but like on a bigger level. So I don't think, in my opinion, people that are aware tend to become more spiritual. So I don't know. I don't know if they are or not. Yeah. I think that some people are malicious, at the end of the day too. So maybe those people are aware, they know what they're doing. Secretly, they're practicing all this spiritual stuff, but then on the other side, keeping other people down. But I'm just speculating now, I don't know that.
Right.
Yeah.
You want to hop over quickly? I don't want to spend too much time on it. UFOs.
What? Yeah. I mean, what do you have? What kind of questions do you have there?
So your overall opinion of the basis of the UFOs is the interdimensional aspect, because time and time again you hear the terrestrial or extraterrestrial aspect. Do you think it's a combination of all of them or just the interdimensional? Because the more I see it, and I'm open to anything, but I do think it's an interdimensional aspect of this. Carl Jung even believed that, 70 years ago, and it's been written about for a while. I see no evidence of the extraterrestrial, and I see lots of overwhelming evidence for the interdimensional aspect.
I do think that's where all my work ends up going, is the interdimensional aspect of it. But at the same time, it's important to understand that the human body itself is an interdimensional creation.
Right.
We have the levels of awareness, which are the delta through fast gamma, but at the same time, we also have the atoms that are creating our body. So we are a very interdimensional being, to begin with, meaning we are a creation of a stacking and a crunching of a whole bunch of different dimensions as we're perceiving it. And so I do think that beings could potentially come from other planets and things like that. But from all my work, I've seen it's more of a less dense and more dense realm kind of thing, where the less dense realms are typically more harmonious. The denser realms are typically distortions of our own creation, and that's what comes into like the jinn, the tulpa, the demon kind of thing. And so through a well-balanced mind that's focused on a delusion can potentially pull out a jinn or a tulpa, and they can live. Someone made a Twitter post earlier today and I ended up commenting on it, and I was like, yes, here's a 20-minute conversation I did specifically on jinn and tulpas and how you have the thought forms and the different dimensional layers. And I do think that some of those black projects were playing a lot with, not really think, I'm pretty confident that they were playing with the concept of the interdimensional aspect, as well as tulpas and jinn, and how it relates to thought forms and different postures that people hold.
So perfect segue. I want to bring everything we talk about today back to the individual, because I think that's the awakening, that people wake up one day and go, holy crap, I'm a participant in this whole thing. So it's not some story about some faraway alien. It almost doesn't matter where things are coming from, because as you said, we're interdimensional entities, and it's just us interacting with another entity. It's just an interaction between two things, right?
Yep.
So then the questions we have to ask ourselves is, okay, what's my role in all of this? If I'm just another participant, what's my role?
That's where I end up leading towards. My role is to harmonize those different dimensional layers. And so in order to harmonize it, that's where you bring your awareness to your perfect center. Because when you're off-centered, you create every mind at every dimensional layer creates distortions. So if you're off-centered in your alpha beta state, you're going to be distorting the denser realms. And so each one of those also fractals out. So like the all would be like one big sphere. The inner realms can break into 16 different versions, like a multiverse. And so every dimensional layer can have a different number of them. So like one big all, 16 inners, 64 inners, 256 inside that. And so ultimately, when it comes to like smoothing out the flows of space-time, it comes down to reaching your center. Because if you're fractaled off to begin with, now the distortions that you've created in a denser realm are even more fractalized. because you can have the laminar flow reach all the way to the center, all the way from the outside to the center, but you need beings to be at center for that to happen. Because if not, it just becomes too distorted, and like it ends up being like rapids in a river, to where there's really no harmony. So why not harmonize the fifth dimensional spiritual energy as it goes through the different dimensional layers? Because not only when you find your center does it bring all your different potentialities to that perfect one, but it also causes the less dense to find its center, the denser realms to find their center. And so what happens when a denser realm finds its center? Well, it actually creates peace within that denser realm. So you could say that, just in a very like, I don't really speculate too much on religions and stuff like that, but like, you could say that the denser realms are almost at war because of our distortions. Like the more we go to war, the more the inner realms want to be at war with themselves too. And so
But doesn't that mean higher realms are at war if we're at war?
It's drifting inwards. Yeah. And so the more we get pulled from center, the more, because we're connected to those higher realms. And so the more we get pulled from center, the more we're pulling them from center.
Oh my gosh.
It's a tug of war.
So there's entities in realms above us and below us doing what you and I are doing right now, or what everyone's doing, of drifting in and out and just trying to find that center. And it's all of these cascading events intertwining
with fractal potentialities. I mean, it's the multiverse and the collapsing of waveforms of the infinite universe, you know. That's the way I've come to see it. So
but where the rubber meets the road is, which I don't know if they incorporate this into the multiverse or the many worlds or whatever, there is a direct connection between all of this. We're all interconnected.
Yeah, through that laminar flow that goes through the middle. That's why even beings that are less dense can be disconnected from the laminar flow. So in my opinion, it's not necessarily that less dense is peaceful or that more dense is malevolent. It's more how close they are to that laminar flow at all the different dimensional layers. And so that's why, like you were saying earlier, like, well, do you always go up? I don't know if you always go up, because I think that once you go up, you can become disconnected and kind of fall back down. So
yes,
it's more about how centered you are through all of the layers. And that's what I would call benevolent, versus malevolent would be more the spirals on the sides.
I want to do a little speculation, if you don't mind.
Oh, that's fun. Let's do it.
So if we're in a dimensional layer and there's a dimensional layer above us and below us, and then just fractals, this is where potentially a lot of religious ideas could come in, of entities from both levels interacting with us, right?
Definitely.
So that would be an angel, right, above us. And I think you and I have discussed that.
That's why it always circles back to religions at the end of the day. Like when you study UFOs a lot, you end up going into religions. I think that's why half of the people are saying they're demons, you know, like that come out. Another half, you know, but it's, I mean, we speak science today, right? So it's a less dense being and it's a more dense being. But to relate that to religion, you could say that's more of an angelic versus demonic. I think it's pretty straightforward, you know. But that's why I don't think that necessarily if you're in a denser realm that you are more demonic. I think it's more how far away you are from the laminar flow. Because not all beings in the less dense realms are great. Not all of them in the denser realms are bad. I mean, how did the angels fall to begin with? If you want to get into religions, right? Like they must have had some type of delusion or want or doubt that then caused them to fall to the earthly plane. If that, you know, if you want to speak fallen angels.
And
I
then
don't know that much about that stuff though.
could that be what the Christ figure is? This is something that Rosicrucians talk about, and this is the Christ consciousness idea, that Jesus, Yeshua, was just a guy that connected with the Christ consciousness, which is that perfect middle ground of complete centeredness in this realm, but he completely centered himself in this realm. So he was able to find that perfect union. Does that make any sense?
It definitely makes sense to me. Yeah. And there's very specific times. I mean, just like we were talking about the circadian rhythm, how you want to pray, how you mentioned that relates to the breath work. It also relates to the precessional cycle of the earth, and very specific times and moments when that laminar flow aligns even easier or better, so that You can have that type of interaction. So it's like, yeah, 2000-ish years ago, Jesus came around and connected with Christ consciousness, or is Christ, or Jesus came around and did all of his work. Well, potentially every 2000-ish or 2029 years-ish, that same type of alignment happens. And that would be like the transfer from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. So it's a moment for Christ consciousness to connect with all beings that are centered, not just because it's not like Jesus is coming back, it's Christ consciousness is coming back, from what I've seen.
Love it. So perfect segue. I'm not a perfect person. I don't know if anyone is. How perfect do I need to be in order to connect with Christ consciousness?
I think that's where love and forgiveness is that number one lesson. Yeah. So I think that's where I don't know either. I don't know how, like, if there's a scale of the scale there or not, but like,
yeah.
I would say being confident in where you are today is a big part of it. Not having to be in a rush or suffering from anxieties, like being in the now, really.
Yeah, because trying to be a perfect person, that's just me forcing a delusion on myself, which is almost like making me take a couple steps back, as opposed to, let me direct my attention, take a low level idea and turn it into, I'm exactly where I need to be. Like that, transmuting that energy in my mind to, no, let me redirect that attention.
Exactly. Instead of living in doubt or like in a tight or some type of anxious pacing or something like that, let me turn that energy into, you are exactly where you should be. Now let's grow from there. Totally.
Oh my gosh. What happens in 2029?
I don't know. I think it's just like the Earth itself goes from the theta state into its alpha state. So like we were speaking earlier on the breath, on the spiral. Well, what creates that in and out motion is ultimately like 4 spheres that are closest, from my understanding. It's not just the 4 local spheres, it's that the 4 local spheres have the most effect within your dimensional layer, because the ones that are really, really far inward are just pacing so like quick that they don't really pull everything back and forth. The ones that are really far out there just take too long to orbit to even care about. So like for the human circadian rhythm, it's basically putting your delta through beta states in a state of orbit and watching how they all overlap and synchronize. So the center of gravity of your conscious waves creates our in and out motion. The Earth itself has that same process though, which happens over 25,920 years. And just what all the work shows is that we're basically in transition from Pisces into Aquarius, or from the Yuga system is actually on point because of the way that they break up the numbers. Instead of having 12 equal ages of the zodiac, they basically break it into 4 different vibrational states, but you hit them in 2 different ways. So you hit these vibrational states as an inward drifting and as an outward drifting, 100% like that circadian rhythm drawing. It relates directly to it. So what I did in the book, I'll show you that drawing actually right now. It's called Spirit, the Vortex of Creation. I end up wrapping the circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
The circadian rhythm is the outer circle here, but I wrap that around the Yuga system, as well as the ages of the zodiac and the law of one energy ray systems.
Right.
And so when you align them, and the easiest way to align them is in the Kali Yugas are the shortest amount of time. Sat Yugas basically we're in for half the time of the cycle. We'll relate that to your circadian rhythm. We're in a delta state for the least amount of time. We're in a beta state for the most amount of time. So you basically align your delta wave to the Kali Yugas, and you can relate the transitions. And so basically you see that the entire Earth system, which is Earth is only Earth to us because it's all relative vibrations, all in superposition, and we evolved from Earth. So we're basically a vortex on top of a vortex. The human body is a vortex, the Earth is a vortex, the sun is a vortex, and we're perceiving very specific dimensional energies. So as the Earth itself has this jump into a denser vibration, all beings that are attached to the Earth will also have a jump. So the way I've come to see it is that the Earth itself is going from like a theta dream harmony to an alpha awake harmony. That's the shift from Dwapara Yuga into Tetra. In the ages of the zodiac, it would be Pisces into Aquarius. In the law of one energy ray systems, it would be yellow ray into green ray. So what does that really mean? Well, it means like the earth is waking up, but at the same time, all beings on the earth will undergo some type of change and have a new sense of purpose. And what I've come to see as well, I have a drawing of that too in the book actually, is depending on how close you are to your center during this transition is how dramatic that will be for every individual. Because if you're off-centered and you're fractalizing into a denser realm, the further you are from center, the more you're going to pace during this moment. So it ultimately leads into somewhat of a moment of turmoil, because right now many people are off-centered. So this is the way I like to see it. So here's like, it's kind of silly. So there's like you're a vortex. That's your golden spot, right? And you're drifting into this new vibration. And so as your body hits this new vibrational field, depending on how close you are to your center, basically all the different delusions get removed as we pass through that. But that will take time depending on how centered you are to begin with. So those that are already off center are going to have a harder time during the process, and it's going to be up to those who are centered to help walk them back to that laminar flow during the process. And what's really interesting to me is you can kind of already see these effects taking place with the identity crises that are going on in our country, and not just in gender, but also in race and money and all the different aspects, how much it's becoming fractalized. And so it's really, in my opinion, up to spreading the word of love or God or harmony, whatever you want to use, to help people through the process. So that's what I think is happening, really. And so also, we're entering a new vibration of awareness. And so that's why more UFOs would be coming out into our realm, because now we've drifted into a new vibration. So things that were invisible to us will now become visible. So that's like the veil somewhat being lifted away as well. I know it's a lot of information. So.
No, it's really good information.
Because one way to think of it is you can bounce off of conscious atmosphere. So at every single, like everyone has a circadian rhythm, but I don't need to jump into a theta state when it's 10 o'clock at night. I could be like playing video games or on my computer typing away and be creating beta waves. So I call that bouncing off conscious atmosphere. So you can always choose to bounce off conscious atmosphere, but at the end of the day, the human body will like suffer without sleep after 3 days. And eventually it falls asleep and it sleeps really hard. So it's a very similar thing. Like people can bounce off this conscious. That's what I tried to show in this photo, was a being that was holding delusions, bouncing around the border between the two, and then finally sinking into it. So here it's like first approaching, now it's bouncing over here, it's bouncing up and down, and it finally sinks into it and is at one with the new vibration that the earth itself is going into.
Isn't that interesting? A lot of people are pushing for, disclosure. Disclosure isn't what we need in the sense people see disclosure of like, aliens exist. That's not the point. The point is everything that we're discussing here of like the deep reality.
Picture. Yeah, no, it's the bigger picture. Like, that's why I try to speak a lot at those Sunset Thoughts, is like, if you guys are focusing on which company is reverse engineering a spacecraft, you're missing the bigger picture. Yeah, that's like worrying about which company's coming out with the newest iPhone. It's the same thing. Why would you? I mean, I understand why people would care, because it's like you get the coolest, newest iPhone, but to be so caught up on like a spaceship or something like that doesn't make much sense to me. It's just another material thing to get caught up on, as opposed to learning the bigger picture. But like we were speaking about earlier, everyone has their pacing motions and ways of learning.
Yeah,
so
it's like every freaking UFO Twitter post should start with "Love is the answer." Okay, now let's talk about Boeing reverse engineering, because that's like what that should lead you to.
Well, that's where all those top researchers end up going with it. Like you mentioned, I think John, but even like Robert
John
Ramirez gets into that. Angeli, I think Bigelow even talks a lot about like harmony and love and stuff like that. Elizondo says look inwards. But people that are in the like somewhat in the know kind of understand that yes, we have all these fun toys, but there's a bigger picture here. But so if it's a step-by-step process, and how do you convince a materialistic world to all of a sudden that there's spirit, and that you need that one of the goals of life is to evolve your spirit? Like, how,
You know how you convince them? Exactly what's happening right now. The identity crisis. Oh, what I thought was true and real in my life actually isn't.
yep.
50 million people, I saw an article of this, 50 million people quit their jobs over the course of the pandemic. So people are, and what happens when you do that, right, is you start to question, oh, if that's not who I am and what I want, who am I and what do I want?
Yep. I've noticed that. I've been watching your videos as well. You've made a series of like workout videos, kind of, not workout videos, but like connecting to earth and your body kind of videos, right? And so you've shown an alchemical transition as well with your work. So I've been watching. I think it's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wiped the slate clean, and I'm starting a new little film series where I want it to be completely artistic and do these higher level thoughts, where I'm going to do kind of short films that touch on these ideas, which I'm basically giving away all of the movies I'm going to make here, but that are very tumultuous processes, but always end with the transmutation of a bad state to love and unity, right?
Yep.
And I'm just going to go all in on that, right? But I was not having fun with the workout videos, because I was like, what do I actually, this is a real-time thing. I was like, what do I actually want? I don't actually want to make workout videos. I want to dive into the deeper levels of this stuff in an artistic manner.
Yeah, and I think that's what happens. Like, as you have that alchemical awakening or process or transition, like like things naturally come into your life, things naturally come out of your life. And the very first couple sunset thought videos I did were maybe about 6-7 minutes.
Right.
Then I ended up doing like maybe 2 or 3 months straight of like 20 to 30 minute videos. And I can already tell they're teetering back down to like that 10-minute video. So, and since that process has happened, now I've started hosting a podcast myself, which like we mentioned earlier, maybe this could be episode number 2 or something. That's why I want to ask questions about like what you're doing as well. Like,
Well, so sort of. Well, I think what both you and I are doing is it comes down to the foundational piece of like what's happening, what's going on, right? And we're just microcosms of that. And hopefully people can glimpse into our own lives and see, how does this relate to myself? If that doesn't happen, then, I don't think we're doing our jobs, right? Because I've gotten into this trap. This is how we started off this conversation. I was watching your sunset thoughts, but I was like, I need to make this real, right? Because I can just get addicted to watching.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that concept up too, because in order to truly make it real, I need to put down the phone and actually watch the sunset, because for those 20-30 minutes, I'm holding a phone. I'm like trying to describe things. I'm missing my mark slightly by still making the videos. And I've come to realize that it's like, man, do I even want to make one tonight? The sunset's so beautiful right now.
Right.
But if I don't, then I don't know. So that's where I'm still pacing. We're always pacing.
Maybe that's where the podcast comes in. You just do the sunset videos like every other night.
Exactly. That's kind of what I think is where it's headed. And then I've also, in the same process, started growing a lot of food recently. So I think that's another cool transition as well. So not only can you connect to like the sun, but you can also connect to plants that are growing, right? So that's a longer thought process as opposed to a Twitter post, which is a 30, like, how many Twitter things you'll flip through in 5 minutes, you go through like 100 different posts.
Yeah.
But like a plant growing from a seed and bearing a fruit, well, that's like at least a 3-month process. So it increases your line of sight. And so not only by the sunset videos, but also through the gardening videos, I'm trying to show that as well,
Alexa, you are a Rosicrucian. That's one of their main principles. It's to watch a plant grow from a seedling all the way up to its blooming, because of exactly what you said. They say this in their text. You get a higher line of sight of the phase of life. And then you can look, this is literally what they say. And then you can look when you have an interaction with the person. I know you say this, when you have an interaction with the person, you can see where in their stage are they.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. And like I said, I've never studied it, but you're not the first person to say that I act like that. I don't know if you've ever spoken with Elena Campbell, but she was like, you're a reincarnated Rosicrucian. I was like, I don't know about that. You know?
I think the reason that happens is it's a testament to that these ideas are actually grounded in something real.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're grounded in something real, and I think that physics can even back it up once you add another dimension. Our 4D physics doesn't really back it up that great, but once you add the fifth dimension, which is time, and you realize that everything's in this state of superposition and it's all in a state of rotation, now you can actually start using technologies, or you can actually start using a 5D physics to create technologies. And I think that's kind of where we're at now, is this transition for all of humanity to become more aware of these technologies. And so that's why it is cool to like, hey, what's Lockheed been building? But you're missing the bigger picture, because typically this comes from self-exploration. And so if you're waiting for someone to tell you what to think, you're missing the bigger picture, right? Like it's not you, what the government says, then universe, or you, religion, then universe. You are the direct connection to these flows. So, you know, I think that Artisan Tony also likes to speak on that, like how you could tell a kid over and over and over, but they never really learn until they experience it. So it's very similar to that. Like you might be able to tell people, hey, there's spirit, there's these things, but they'll never really know until they experience it, or have that like 100% confidence until they learn the lessons themselves. And that's why I think that if anyone in general were to find their center, they would already basically unlock the keys to these 5-dimensional physics. It just naturally, it's like when you look out into the world, you drop a pencil, well, hey, things fall. When you have a bigger line of sight, like we were just talking about, being able to see something grow from seed to the future, almost, your line of sight increases. And I kind of lost my train of thought there, but yeah.
So, but you made me think of something. The Yugic system, is that how you pronounce it? I know nothing about.
I think it's called Yuga system.
Yuga system.
Yeah.
From the very limited knowledge I know, I think we're in like the densest part of the Yuga system. Are you familiar with that?
I got my information on the Yuga system because I was just trying to put it in a way that relates. And I got my Yuga information, like the Hinduism, from Sadhguru.
Okay.
So I listened to what Sadhguru said, and basically he said that the end of Krishna's era was about 5,000 years ago, and that was what they marked as the Kali out. The start of Kali out was the end of Krishna's era, and that would be like the start of our Delta out when you align the different wheels. And so if you were to add, it's really simple. You just do math. You just add the 5,000 years between when Krishna passed away and the day today. Well, we're entering Tetra Yuga. So now we're drifting into a denser.
Okay.
So Delta would be the most least dense. So Kali would be the most least dense as far as energetic vibrations. Dwapara and Theta would be the second least dense. So it's like Delta, Kali, Theta. That's why I like this drawing. Let me pull it out again.
Yeah.
Because it really helps with that whole in and out motion. And that's even where like a lot of other sacred geometries come from too, is that whole in and out motion. I'll show you one of those drawings real quick, which is basically the crown. It's the alignment of all the different vortices and different spirals makes that crown motion. Those are all the different in and out motions, you could say. But what I wanted to show was, I have one that shows all of them layered right next to each other. So where are we at? That center, you could say, is the center, the densest part of all creation. Out here, you can see that the rings are less dense. And so we're always orbiting through this system, like going in towards center and away towards less dense. So delta wave, Kali Yuga.
I see what you're saying.
Theta wave, Dwapara Yuga. Alpha wave, Tetra Yuga. Beta wave, Sat Yuga. But then we drift back out, and then we drift back in. And so that's not only the circadian rhythm, it's not only the human breath, it's not only the hydrogen atom, right? It's also the precessional cycle of the Earth, and ultimately all of the quantum, energies that exist in both those less dense and more dense realms, always in this slurry of a vortex, kind of moving with each other. And from there we get our dimensional layer, because the human body evolved to detect very specific layers. Not only layers within that, not only layers of sound and vision, but we also evolved to detect layers of awareness. And that's why we have our delta through fast gamma layers. which are very specific frequencies. And to relate that to science, you could say those are the microtubules that Penrose talks about.
Yep.
Yeah.
But doesn't he takes a in Emperor's New Mind? He's still a materialist though, right? So isn't that odd?
The body did evolve, but from like that's where it's it's dimensional relationships at the end of the day. So it is material. That's why I say we're multidimensional, because we have everything from the tiniest frequency to the biggest frequency, but we're catching waves of it, like little glimpses of it as it's orbiting, like as it properly aligns with our body's vibration. Yeah, I could go on. It's weird. That's ultimately where you get dark matter from, and dark energy is when the energy is orbiting beyond our perception. Because you could think of each one of our conscious harmonics and our levels of awareness as like the shells of a black hole, but there's spaces between the shells, but the energy is still orbiting through. And so we only catch glimpses of it when it's interacting within our dimensional layer.
So our perspective seems so small as humanity. Like we're alive for 80 to 100 years. Like our perspective seems so condensed. Are we ever going to be, live for hundreds of thousands of years? Do we even want to? Maybe we want to segue to that. Do we want to live for hundreds of thousands of years, with AI technology, or is that the wrong direction to go in?
I think that would cause us to de-evolve. When it comes to the evolution of spirit, I mean, now this might be going back into like some type of Buddhist philosophy here, I'm not sure, but like after the human experience, they can either become a grasshopper or something less. So I mean, grasshoppers have a much shorter life than a human does. So potentially, I'm just theoretically speaking here, because I've never really thought about that much, but maybe you could become a star and live for 4.5 billion years. But for a human body to live for 4.5 billion years, or however many billions of years the star lives, I don't know if that's a good thing. Because ultimately, when it comes to evolving to gain these higher senses of awareness, we didn't become the human that we are today, like by being disconnected from Earth and harmonies. It's basically survival of the fittest of a single-celled organism, like evolving over time. And every one of our senses of awareness have come from being in tune with Earth, and in tune with the sun, and in tune with nature. So by disconnecting our bodies from nature, by use of technology, I doubt we'll ever gain higher senses naturally. And by higher senses, I mean different levels of awareness. Because you could say that before we even had sound, we had feel and taste. And so we would either have like the wall or no wall kind of thing going on. Then when we get sound, we get the speed of sound, but that's limited to the edge of the Earth, the atmosphere of the Earth. So if you were to do science at the evolved state where all you had was sound, you would think that only the Earth exists and nothing is beyond it. Now, as a human, as we've evolved within nature and time, we think that the edge of the smooth cosmic microwave background is the edge. Well, that's just where the speed of light, or that's just where the flow of space-time is moving at the speed of light. So it's very similar to like us thinking that the edge of the Earth would be the limitation. Currently, we think that the edge of the universe is our limitation. So in order to actually gain the next sense of awareness, I think that's done through a natural evolutionary process. And if you're just a human, but if you're a human being that's living for hundreds of years, you might not be evolving naturally.
So
to gain higher senses.
So do you think potentially as we're reaching this nexus point in 2029 approaching where technology is growing, but also we're undergoing this, greater shift on Earth and our senses, do you think it's a possibility that 2027 to 2029, we actually reach a nexus point where people go, oh, it's not AI that's going to change us, it's ourselves that's going to change us, and then we just completely go off a different path? Or is it going to be split where some people, are going down this path and some people are still going, no, it's the AI is going to save us?
I think that there is potentially a split that happens. And we're getting into the woo now. If we weren't already there, now we're in the woo. But basically the way I've come to see it is like, I only connect with people physically and spiritually if we're somewhat on the same page to begin with. So now when people become more and more materialistic, well, they're naturally going to branch off in a certain direction, and other people are going to branch off in another direction. So I do think that some people are going to be caught up in the materialistic kind of thought process, and those type of people won't ever even interact with the other ones. So, and those type of people are going to evolve further and further away from source or God, whatever word you want to use,
Yeah,
laminar flow. Meanwhile, the others will head towards that laminar flow and ultimately evolve spiritually, right? So it's potentially, and maybe that has to do with
yeah.
more of the reincarnation cycle, to where the people that went towards the material side will stay in that material realm, and the ones that went towards the spiritual side will have the ability to make a choice.
I
They'll have
agree.
more freedom. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? What fate loves irony. Wouldn't that be interesting if the people who just decide to put their attention on spiritual growth and enlightenment, if they end up being the ones that evolve, and the people that were like, no, it's AI, and then they just get stuck in this materialistic.
Well, AI is bad. Well, not bad. AI is great. It's a great tool, but it's important to be aware of what AI is going to do to our future. I mean, even like in my lifetime, I've seen Google make people into idiots almost, like because they no longer have to have information or have gone through experiences. So they just say, hey, Google says this is your answer.
Mhm.
So now that's your answer. Where was your self-exploration? Well, it was you sat down on a computer and you just typed in a few words. AI is going to be that, but to the next level. So I think people are becoming even more and more disconnected from the natural flows because of AI. But if you are aware of that, then it's okay, because it becomes a tool that you can use, and it's not your truth. It's something that can provide you some feedback so you can make a better decision, right? It's a way to use a tool properly. Like Google doesn't know every truth. They fact
Mhm.
check everything there. So like, um, that's what a lot of people think. That might not be the only way,
I
when you get what
agree,
I'm saying, right?
100%. And I just
Yeah.
saw you follow Diana Pasulka, who's I love her so much.
Yep.
She did an interview recently where she does a lot of research on Plato, and he didn't like the new invention of writing, or it was Plato or Socrates, I forget which one. She said he didn't like the new invention of writing because it's just like what the internet or AI is doing. Writing took firsthand experience, and people could just read a book and go, oh, I know this now, as opposed to actually diving in and
Yep.
experiencing.
Yeah, it becomes biased too, especially when you start studying Shakespeare in English class. Because now, if you're not writing down what your teacher wants you to think that Shakespeare means when he says things, it's
Yeah,
like they don't even know what Shakespeare was trying to say. Um, but they want you to write, they want you to start acting, I totally get what you're saying. And like that's why I try not to read anyone else's work or I'll listen to what other people have to say, like verbally, like we're speaking. But I don't like when other people just start quoting someone else. I'm like, no, no, what do you think? I don't want to hear what that person told you to think. I want to hear what you think. Kind of thing.
that's why when I'm going down this spiritual path, I hate to even call it. I'm going down my life path. That's what it is. And a life path is a spiritual path. I lost my train of thought. Um,
Well, we were talking about like biases that come from reading alone. And that's why I
yeah,
try to tell people like this is my truth, and take it or leave it, but it shouldn't be how you see truth, because you're gonna misinterpret the way I put the words down sometimes. It's
mm,
just what happens. I misinterpret things when I read them. Yeah, I'll read the right word. I'll read the sentence word for word correctly, but my interpretation of that sentence is off.
but so I remember what I was going to say. I go down this path, and maybe I shouldn't try to explain it to people. I'm like, this is why I'm doing it. This is what I'm doing because this is what I believe, and I hate using that word. But like, this is my truth. And then people go, oh, well, where's the proof for all of these various different things? And then, quote unquote, proof. I tell people the first part of proof, which I think you point people to, is look in your own heart. The second you start to peel back the layers of your heart, you're going to find things that you have never known before, right? Experiences, emotions, thoughts, life forms in your head, synchronicities, all of these things. So first and foremost, look there, but no one wants to do that. So, but then the second thing is like giving them papers or books, but then they're like, this is just books. Like this book talks about this amazing experience this person had about an entity appearing to them and the mystical experiences they have. And they're like, why isn't that on YouTube? Right. So, which is a good question.
Yeah. No, and that's funny too, because like they're like, well, where's your source? Oh, you made a quote some old other guy instead of telling you about my personal experience of it.
Right.
Yeah. So that's where like, and that's always a biased opinion. It's like the telephone game. Every time, it gets written and translated, spoken to someone else, it's always, it's straying further and further from the true message that the person was even trying to portray. Because not only do I have a bias in the way I can use words to present a message, but now everyone has their bias in how they interpret messages. And so that's why, in my opinion, the true learning is always inward. And certain things do echo. Like after we have this conversation, I'm sure some points will echo and I'll be thinking about them, to where I have a little, I would have shifted slightly in a certain way or another. But I'm not going to say, I don't want anyone that's watching this to say this is now my new truth because I just saw this podcast, some kind of thing like that. It's the truth is your own.
What I've done that, as sure we all have. I'll think this is, I'm so impressionable, which I think we are as humans, where I'll see something and I'll be pulled in that direction and I'll go down that direction for a minute, an hour, a day, 2 days, and then have to go back to center again. Happens every single day. But now I'm meditating like literally 2 hours a day, which has been happening for about 2 weeks now, and being very aware of my thoughts because I was like, I need to own my thoughts. I need to own my thoughts. If I don't own my thoughts, I'm just going to be out with the wind, right? Which is an insanely difficult process. It's so difficult.
It is. Well, especially when you want to, I want to know. I want to know what the government has done with all these UFO experiments. I would love to know every single one of the things that they've done. But like, I'm not that's when you go down the rabbit hole. Everyone does, right? We always have this pacing. And for me, like I noticed that I've been like looking at Twitter, and Twitter was good for this kind of information for a few months. But now Twitter has shifted to like almost like you have your hate UFO people out there that are, it's so weird how much it just shifted from like working together to try to disclose mysteries of the universe to I don't even know what words to use, but like high school kind of like he said this, she said that, and no one's even being productive. It's kind of weird to me,
but it'll pace back.
I hope so, and I hope it does sooner than later. Yeah, no, it will. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I had literally 4 pages of things I wanted to talk about. I mean, there's so much. This is important. So I was doing those workout videos because I was going off in that direction, but I was like, okay, I'm doing all of this and I'm feeling in center, but I'm still not making a conscious effort. I'm making a physical effort, which gets you in a good base level state where you can be happy. But now I need to bring everything internal and do the internal heavy lifting of, let me be aware of my thoughts. Let me consciously pull in good thoughts. Let me examine bad thoughts. Let me be which is totally different than getting my morning sun and going for a walk. It's like that stuff helps, but that's just putting on, the armor. I actually have to go to battle. It's a terrible analogy, but I actually have to go to battle in my mind, which getting sun, eating healthy, I still need to go to battle in my brain.
Well, I think it's a great analogy, because you've done all the preparation. Now it's time to put it into action. It's this, like we were talking about earlier, almost like as I've been watching the sunsets and doing that stuff, it's almost like I can't actually enjoy and watch the sunset if I'm making a video or if I'm focused on what's the topic of tonight. It's completely not even following the principles that I'm speaking on almost sometimes at a certain point. If that's why I even made one of the videos where it's like, I don't know if I'm going to do this every night, because if I feel like I'm forcing it, then I'm not doing it right. So yeah, I've skipped a couple nights, but I've pretty much done them all. But again, like you have to actually implement. Now it's game time. So you practice for like the soccer game, and now it's game time. You're hopping in, you got to, score some goals.
I love that game time. Like I'm eating super healthy, but I think I put too much of that mental energy of like, oh, eat healthy, take your vitamins. Like I put all of that energy there, and it's like, whoa. Like you said, it's game time. Like that's when I need to start making changes in my life. I need to start examining my thoughts. That's what this all comes down to.
Well, the thoughts, like I think that we spoke about this in the beginning of the conversation. It's not just your thoughts, but it's also your subconscious thoughts, the ones that you might not even be aware of.
But you have to make them. You have to be aware of them, right?
Become aware of them, because the closer you get to your center, you'll notice you'll have like almost like twitches or desires in a way to do something, but then it's ask yourself what even instilled that initial desire to do that action. It comes down to a subconscious programming that's been going on. And so we all have these different layers that within our subconscious, and ultimately that's why we were saying earlier, it's the collective subconscious mind that ultimately creates the physical we experience, because we all act based off of our subconscious minds. So it's not, in order for it to have like a true world peace or world harmony, it's not just we need to be consciously aware. We need to be consciously aware of our subconscious minds first. So it's another step there, but not impossible. It's very possible. Yeah, very possible.
But I know how hard it is for me. I can't imagine how hard it is for other people who don't put any of their mental energy in this direction of life.
That's where it's circling. The first time they might only go so far, and they'll circle back to it. They'll go a little further, circle back to it. They'll go further.
50,000 years.
50,000 lifetimes.
Yeah,
I don't know.
exactly.
It could be. It could be. Yeah. But I think at the same time, like, if you were to really dedicate, like you have, if, you know, like other people have, if you were to really dedicate, I think that you can go pretty far in one lifetime.
That's true.
Yeah. So it really comes down to what you dedicate your time to. Anything you do, you'll get better at.
Yeah.
Even if it's watching Twitter, you'll get better at it. If it's walking down the street, you get better at it. Going on runs, you get better at it. Anything you do, you get better at. Like negative and positive actions, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And the growth is exponential a lot of times too.
It is.
Yeah. But then you might plateau out. So that's what I've always noticed, is when I have those plateaus is when I want to circle back through. And then basically it's like when you lift weights, I think it's a very similar thing. Like say you do bench press, you've plateaued, you've hit a certain strength. Well, now go like work your other muscles a little bit. Then it's a body shock. It shocks the system. It starts developing new muscles. Then go back to your bench press. It'll do better. You'll have a new plateau. So it's always about that plateauing, and then realizing you've plateaued. Now go to another direction almost.
100%. That's why, like, when I do deep in this research, it's like, all right, forget the angels, forget the higher level things. Like, I'm aware of that. I've never had like a overt experience, but I've had a lot of like strange experiences, right? Maybe for my level of awareness, right? But okay, I almost need to forget about that and go back to, am I loving myself? Am I taking care of myself? Am I examining my thoughts, right? As opposed to just putting all of my attention on those things. Because I think a lot of UFO Twitter puts a lot of their attention on those things and does potentially not enough self-work.
Yeah. No, no, you 100%. I just wanted to say tonight, I don't think I'll be able to do the 3.5 hour conversation we did last time.
I also have to go. You want to do 8 more minutes?
We could definitely do that. I was thinking at most another like 30, but yeah.
Okay, I have a call at 6 p.m. So yeah, maybe like 10, 15 more minutes.
That sounds perfect.
Awesome. Anything you want to talk about? I'm full of.
No, let's talk about you. What have you noticed within your life as you've been doing you could say alchemical reaction there? Because I've definitely seen a change, you know, and even looking at you today, you look like happier and healthy. I mean, I don't know if I'm just kind of saying things. You look healthier.
So small little thing. A couple nights ago, I fell asleep smiling, which I cannot tell you the last time that has happened. Not that I'm an angry person, but
I literally right now. That's what I'm getting at.
Dude, I literally 3 nights ago fell asleep, and I was conscious as I was doing it, as I was falling asleep. I had a smile on my face as I was falling asleep. The biggest thing, I mean, there's so many directions we could take this in. Here's an interesting thing. Happened yesterday. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. I have a witness for it. So yesterday was Sunday. I went on a long run, and I'm in the middle of this, you know, alchemical process and giving it a lot of my attention. Like every hour of the day, I have to snap back into conscious awareness of be conscious. Don't fall unconscious. Don't fall asleep and just be mindless. I've been doing this for a couple of weeks of like really lifting the weights and being in the game. yesterday on my runs is a very spiritual thing, right? Because it's directing my attention. It's just me and my mind. So that's one of my forms of meditation. On my run, one of the places my mind goes, but very deliberately, and I said I'll follow this thought, is I need to be perfectly balanced, right? So if I'm on this run and this is the thought I'm having, and I see a homeless person, where in times past I would be like, no, Mike, I'm running. This is my time. I'm growing myself. I can't stop for the homeless person right now because I'm running. And in my head, I was like, no, I need to be able to balance both sides. I need to be able to train. But if there's a homeless person and he's, I can stop, I can give a minute, 2 minutes of my time, even if it's in the middle of my run and I'm sacrificing my marathon training. That is just as important. I'm having these thought processes in my head. And it totally aligned with this is who I'm going to be. And that's the interaction that I'm going to supplant in my heart. I'm like, this is who I am. I'm done my 8-mile run. I'm getting coffee. There's a homeless person sitting outside the coffee shop. He's asleep. I'm trying to get his attention, but he's asleep. I go in the coffee shop. As I'm walking out of the coffee shop, it's pouring raining in Philadelphia. He tries to get some rain cover right in the little vestibule. I go, dude, what do you want? Right? I buy him 10 donuts. I buy him a coffee. The best, most cordial interaction with a homeless person I've ever had. Right? Awesome. Don't make anything of it. Go 100 yards down the street, meet up a friend of mine. Another homeless guy, see him outside a shop. Hey, dude, what do you want? Even though I'm meeting for an hour with my friend, supposed to give him my full attention. I'm like, hey, homeless dude, what do you want? He's right outside a bagel shop I'm going into. Like, I'm literally walking in this bagel shop. He's right there. I'm like, dude, what do you want? You got it, right? I bought this guy 3 bacon, egg, and cheeses. Leave that shop. I go to Starbucks. I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot to get water. So I get myself water after my run. I get myself some orange juice, electrolytes, walk outside the Starbucks. There's a homeless guy. I'm like, take these 2 orange juice, take everything, right? I see a 4th homeless guy and I give him my water. 4 interactions with homeless people in literally a matter of 30 minutes. They were the most cordial interactions I've ever had with homeless people, where there was a true, genuine connection, where I was giving myself to that person in full conscious awareness of, this is not a burden to me. I genuinely want to help you, and I genuinely see you as a human being. And like, I swear I made that happen. And those interactions, there was something there where they spoke to me and I spoke to them, and they saw me and I saw them. And that is just a small thing out of the past 2 weeks of dozens of things that have happened.
I think that's awesome. Congrats on that. And there's so many different things I could say about that in itself, but ultimately it's those spirals of delusion that we decide to put ourselves into. I'm not saying that the speaking was one, but going on a run and then ignoring everything. When you jump into a car and you start driving, you tend to ignore, in general, people tend to ignore the people next to them. You have a mission. You are going to the store. You're doing a certain action. Well, that's a path you have chosen to make, right? So when you're going on a run, for example, you don't want to stop for anything. You don't want to learn, but that's because you're caught up in your own delusion. Like, if you're actually connected to earth and harmony and everything that's around you, then as you go on your run, you have more freedom to interact with anyone that's on the road. It doesn't have to be a homeless person. It could be anyone that's needing help or something, right?
100%.
So, I just think that that's an important thing, is to become aware that we lock ourselves into certain states of mind. So, because you could go on a run, say, I'm going to run and I don't care about anyone else, or I'm going to go on a run, but still be open to possibilities of things changing. And so that right there in itself is one way to also connect to that laminar flow. So I think that's great that you brought that up, and that happened too. I mean, that's really cool,
Yeah.
but at the same time, you got to be careful, right? Like, because if the homeless guy is damaging themselves by doing the same repeating pattern over and over and over, it's good to try to help walk them to a different lifestyle, if possible, and if that's where they're at in their life. Because I see some homeless people right now that live next to me, and they're doing the same exact thing, and they have been for 4 years. And if I were to give them food, it doesn't really help. It's not what they need. You know what I'm saying? Like, what they need is like what I think you offered, a genuine human interaction. Genuine human care, I think, is a lot more important. So
one of the homeless guys, I gave him, he was like, yo, you got any vodka? And I gave him my orange juice. I said, no, but I have an orange juice.
Exactly.
And I said, a lot healthier for you. And we both had like a genuine laugh between each other. And the only thing on his mind was alcohol, right? But I gave him orange juice.
Right. You're like, here's an orange juice. Big smile. Yeah.
Literally another guy. I was in Rittenhouse Square, which is a really nice part of Philadelphia. It's pouring raining. I'm with my friend. He has an umbrella and I'm just sitting in the rain. It's pouring raining. And him and I are just having a conversation in the park. And I absolutely love it because I'm like, I know what's happening. I'm just like feeling it. Another guy walked by. Hey, you guys got any cigarettes? I'm making a joke with the guy. I'm like, I just got done a run. Do you think I'm smoking cigarettes? And he starts laughing. And I have lox, salmon lox in my hand. I'm like, hey, how about you take a lox? And he took some salmon lox and just starts eating it, right? So those, I don't know, it felt, it didn't feel like I was hindering them at all.
No. And like the fact that you acknowledged them, spoke with them and had like a good, I always say you let the love flow. Like you let the interaction flow. Like you weren't holding back like, oh no, like he wants this stuff from me. Like you were open and you let a genuine interaction happen. I think that even translates back into like the whole concept of cancers within the human body. Like when we become magnetically disconnected from the people next to us, we've now set up all these walls and barriers. It's the same as a single cell in your body. When it detaches magnetically from the cells next to it, now it turns into a cancer. And so by always living in your own like states of delusion where you're refusing, where you've set up walls, right? And you're refusing to connect with one person or another because you have your delusions, that ultimately is like a cancerous kind of thing on the earth itself, because you're not in tune with the magnetic fields of all the people and of earth systems. So that's one way of actually helping those people as well, because typically the homeless people aren't that connected to other people. And so in order to help, in quotes, cure is not the right word, in order to help them and also to help you, connect with them in a let the love flow kind of way.
Yes.
Yeah, it's where like the energies can bounce back and forth, and like it's not just a wall where it just stops dead, you know?
Oh my gosh, it's so powerful. Like I felt like a force, and my friend was there. I'm like, dude, do you see what's happening? He's in a big transitional period of his life. So I think for him to even just see that is an amazing thing. And I mean, there's countless things, right? So to go off your question, like what has been happening? I mean, where do I even begin, right?
Let the love flow. I'm just kidding.
Literally, I had a phone call with my mom the other night where she sent me a picture when I was like maybe 16 to 22, had a very tumultuous relationship with my mom as like a very young, angry man. And like on the phone call, and now I'm 29 years old, but on a phone call, she texted me a picture of my niece or nephew. And I was like, I'm calling my mom right now, right? So I called my mom, and I just happened to, she could text me pictures of my niece and nephew all the time. I was in the middle of a movie. I paused the movie. I said, I'm calling my mom right now. I called her in, and she was in one of the most emotional states of just complete gratitude. I didn't know that at all. She was crying on the phone, sitting with my dad, and she was like, my dad, dad and I are just so grateful. And I was like, the fact that this is happening right now. She was crying on the phone about how just grateful she is for her niece, her grandchildren. And she was like, Mike, the only thing I want from you, we're going to vacation next week. She's like, I want you and I to go walk on the beach, hand in hand and just talk. I was like, you got it every single day. So yeah, I think that's the biggest change.
That's awesome. I think that's great.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I mean, yeah, like, cause it translates. I mean, like, goes from me to you, goes to the next person, but the same is also true with like hate and negativity. Right. So like, what's the ultimate vibration you're putting out? I think, is a really important thing.
Yeah.
Just like smiles, right? I think it's almost a good spot to end it.
Yeah. Honestly, this was killer, dude. Episode number 2.
Yes, sir. For you and me, and then also for the Looshes Labs podcast.
Yeah. Dude,
Yeah.
to anyone watching out there, yeah, I think that's the big thing I struggle with, right? Is like making this a personal reality. And I think once, and we all do this in small ways, once you take those small steps, as the book ends, Crime and Punishment, it's when life takes the place of theory, right? It's when it actually becomes real, and there's an actual transmutation of energy. Yeah.
It's game time.
I love it. I love it. It's game time. That's literally how I'm viewing things now. And it is actual, it is hard to step outside yourself and help anyone, help yourself and help other people. Yeah, dude, I love it. This was a great conversation.
I wish I would have known my light was so funny. I
No,
wasn't
it
paying
looks
attention at all. I should have turned it up. Oh well, next time.
dude,
Oh well.
great conversation.
Yes, sir. I look forward to speaking with you again, as always.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to say goodbye, I guess, to the audience real quick, and I'll hang off for a couple minutes or whatever if you're down.
All right, man. I'm gonna head out. I gotta prep for this call. It's actually a business meeting for one of the guys I work with. Reality calls. But dude, as always, it's a pleasure, and looking forward to everything that you do going forward.
Yes, sir. I'll speak with you soon.
All right, man. Take care.
Have a good one. See ya, man.
See ya.